Left 4 Dead and 2, were like my first several thousand-hour games that I could definitively prove I have wasted
I
my life on
I
this. So
definitely thought Left 4 Dead was fun in small doses, but after a couple of hours, I was like, I'm bored.
it might also have depended on when you got in, right? Because they really shook up the meta, which is finally what got me out of it, because it was like not the game that I had started playing. So, but
Yeah. I guess I'm just more about either MMOs or games where I can play against other people, not play against the computer. Like playing together against like the computer, like in Left 4 Dead. I'm more into like Apex or League of Legends or some PvP game like that.
I mean, it's true to say that there's no AI that's really going to be straightforward. No symmetrical AI that's going to be as good as a good human player. But you just go. In my case, if I want to have a good strategy thing, I just would rather play some like AI War, which has a really robust but asymmetric AI.
Yeah, my roommate loves like any strategy. He plays some like Stellaris and all these big
that too.
strategy games. He loves it. I'm just not into it.
Speaking of blood, the Martian.
What does the Martian have to do with blood?
Blood for the blood guy. Dying. Come on now. So I was going way, way further back than that. But
you could have like, speaking of Stellaris and space, the Martian.
I thought about it, but I decided to go get the gamers involved instead. So I mean, Stellaris. I don't mean that it's not a game. I find that that's probably a much smaller footprint though than the fantasy war game crowd. So.
Probably just based on time, since Stellaris isn't more than like 10 years old, if that. So
could be. I'm thinking, anecdotally on population. Like I can count on one hand how many people I know play that and were like evangelize about it, right? Versus like everybody understood the other reference that we're now explaining. That horse.
Yeah, it's not just, it is funny that because like. I'm surprised everybody here knows that game because it's just I thought it was so niche, but I mean I guess not.
So, The Martian, perfect movie, yay or nay?
Yay.
Yeah, this is your pick, right? So, okay, Ben, why are we mad at you this week?
Oh, so hey! I didn't say anything.
You can't sigh like that. Like, come on now.
I didn't say anything. It's just
you slide.
I want to hear why it's a perfect movie first. I don't want to ruin anybody's day. I want to be positive. Why is this a perfect movie, Andreas?
Why is it? It's okay. Let's see. Why is it a perfect movie? The pacing, like I was like, it's stellar. It's so tight, so good. The casting, phenomenal. The humor, great. It's just. What's not to love? The story is compelling.
You got to talk about the science.
The science is almost correct.
Almost correct.
Yeah, there's just like there's a couple of little things, and it's almost all true to life, except for the Hermes. It's not.
No, the Hermes is still there. The biggest like flaw in the story is the storm that strands him in the first place. It is almost literally impossible. And so like even Andy Weir, acknowledges that. Everybody, all their science advisors kind of brought it up, but it's like, yeah, well, we need something, right?
That's the premise. Okay. You can get away with the premise. I'm not worried about the premise. You can get away with anything in the first 15 minutes of anything.
It's the rules of hard science fiction. Again, in hard science fiction, there's always one gimme. There's always one thing that is kind of driving the story in some way. We've talked about it. I've talked about it 100 times. Like The Expanse, it's the juice. Star Trek is more space fantasy, so that doesn't really count. Star Wars is definitely space fantasy in that regard, right? But there's always one thing, and usually it's an FTL drive, right? And so that enables you to go to alien planets and then get stranded, whereas this one, we just stayed home, more or less, at Mars. But yeah, like they talk about because Mars's atmosphere is like, what, 0.6% ours or whatever, that literally like hurricane force winds would be like a stiff breeze. So it's like, yes, we see the huge dust storms and all of that stuff on Mars, but it's dust. It's not tipping over a spaceship. It's not, tearing something off and impaling a dude, But other than that, the science, like, Neil deGrasse Tyson, they had NASA, kind of giving them, producing level notes or whatever on the science. Like, it's one of the most accurate movies you're going to find.
The book that it's based on was also very well researched,
right?
Where they like I said, I think the only thing that's not really like you bring up the storm. I didn't actually know that. The Hermes, like I said, is not science. It doesn't work like that. Like the way, like how fast it travels and the slingshotting or something like it doesn't actually. That's not exactly true to life.
So the slingshotting and everything, I mean, those mechanics at least exist, right? But like they're supposedly using a plasma drive to get a little bit more thrust than we would functionally be able to do, because it's based off of a drive that hasn't been deployed yet, right? But still, all of that technology is at least in the research phases. Sure. So it's not like pure flight fantasy. Like the engine that they're using is based off of an engine designed by a guy who used to work for NASA, Costa Rica, I think. IMDb has all of this information if you're curious about more. But yeah, like so that's the thing. It's like, yes, I mean the Hermes is a little bit, 2001 Space Odyssey, but at the same time, there's nothing featured there that hasn't at least been, had papers written about it, right? Like, sure, we haven't built an orbital ring that simulates artificial gravity and all of that stuff, but it's been theorized for 30 or 40 years, by this point, right? So anyway, sorry. This is my other passion project. I'm not just a science fiction nerd. I actually like the science behind it, So,
which is why you love The Expanse so much, probably.
I mean, it helps, so...
I mean, it's just so good. Like, I even think like how it would take differences from book to movie. There are things in the book, of course, that I would have loved to see in the movie. But the reason why the pacing is so tight in this movie and so good is because they chose very well, I feel like, and they added a very good epilogue to this movie, which is not in the book, which I thought like really wrapped the movie up. Or the story, if we were to say both book and movie together, it wrapped the story up better than the book did. I still think the book is better because the book is really, 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 really good. But that epilogue is, I wish that was in the book. So that, I mean, for me, like I said, like it's just, I think it just scores and all marks. I think to repeat, the pacing, the casting, the story, humor's great. Even in like this, it's a serious movie, and there's tense moments too, and it's just and what's not to love,
right? Director,
I liked it. I don't know what I've never read the book, so I don't know any of those things that might be better in the book that should have been in the movie. I've heard that the Iron Man thing at the end is not how they did it in the book, so I don't know what that.
I think that's to add some. It's to add some tension to the movie, and I get it, and it's kind of ridiculous a little bit. That's not very. That's kind of. I think that's why he didn't do it in the book, because I know Andy Weir worked on the script as well, and it's not. It's less. It's very unlikely that would work.
Yeah.
But it's not the way the book ends in that regard is a lot less exciting. There's more drama on the trip, where they chose to not do drama on the trip in the movie. Sure. And do the drama here in the end, which I think works better for a movie than
I agree with that.
Better in the book. Yeah.
But I don't know if there was better ways of people being smart of trying to get him and close that distance that wasn't poking a hole in your suit that you can totally control that because it's on your arm, right? But that's like the only thing. Knowing that that's not how that they should have done it, that could have been made better, maybe potentially. But I don't know what they did in the book. And that's like pretty much the only thing. I didn't know the thing about the storm not being possible. I just assumed it's a planet where nothing lives. Of course they're going to have apocalyptic storms. And I just never thought about it any more than that because of their low atmosphere. The pacing is good. The casting is perfect. And the delivery is really, really good for all the things that they need to do. they did a decent amount of explaining the science of what they're doing. Like the hexadecimal thing that even Ridley Scott said, like he has having trouble understanding it to be able to show it. I'm sure he had a whole fleet of nerds to be able to help. But it's like, okay, it's something to do with pointing and he writes it down and then he has a code and whatever. Now we can move on.
I would just like to pause for a moment to highlight the fact that the group noun for nerds is now a fleet of nerds. So like a murder of crows, a fleet of nerds. Like that's
it works. Starfleet would be happy.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, and a lot of that stuff was great. I mean, both kind of in the original stuff, and then of course because Ridley Scott, right? You also get more nerd moments with crossovers with Alien and Aliens and stuff like that. With the mostly left unsaid, in space no one can hear you. Oh, you know the rest, type of stuff. And I don't know. I mean, the casting, holy shit, man! Mm-hmm. Like I didn't realize. I don't think I realized until last night that it was Sebastian Stan, because I was like, holy shit, I'm pretty sure that's him. Go to IMDb. Oh my God.
And Benedict Wong too, right? Shows up.
Yeah, him I definitely knew because this one came out like right after Doctor Strange, didn't it? So
no, it came out before, I thought
it was
did
before.
It? Well, it was near, but yeah, so that one wasn't a surprise. Everybody knows Sean Bean, and one of the like 3 movies he doesn't die in. So
and what's the guy who's the bad guy from Serenity, who's also in Doctor Strange?
Chiwetel, or
the guy who plays
I really was going
to
look up his pronunciation.
Yeah, I would really like to know how to pronounce his name because every time I look at it, I'm like, I'm going to say it wrong.
Yeah,
but he's great.
I don't remember his name, but I remember the character and his alter ego, the guy who plays Rich Pernell, who does Childish Gambino as well. So yeah, he is so good as an actor. Actually,
yeah, he's just being the kooky weird one, which he's very, very good at doing. And I feel like they just like, okay, you're going to be weird and you're going to be like a math nerd. Go for it.
Right.
Well, he fucking killed it.
Yeah.
Apparently his like fall down when he's going to get more coffee was unscripted, so they it's one of those that they kept in, which is fantastic. And
yes,
I'm your boss, right? Like
just the way that delivered, that completely uncomprehending. Yeah, why are you asking? Like he has no idea about this social situation there, and it's so good.
Right. Well, not just that, but he's like so lost in the problem, right? Like that's the part where it's like, it'd almost be easier if, and then they were like, you're going to tell me, right? Tell me what you're working on.
Is this something important that I should tell the others before we do something and commit to a thing that we need you to tell us to commit to?
Right. And then it's like exactly that thing, right? But luckily, I mean, it all kind of works out because they've got time to be able to do the slingshot burn and everything. But, talk about, adding drama and, having him otherwise be like an unimportant character, like up to that point, right? But they're interspersing his journey while they're still trying to solve the problem. And then you're like, what is this guy even doing? And he's freezing his ass off in the server room so that he can plug directly into the supercomputer mainframe so he can minimize the latency and all of this other stuff. And it's just like, holy shit. And then at the end, like with all the executives, and it's great because you've got, like, he does his whole spiel and be like, you get out. Like the grown-ups are going to talk now.
Yeah, that is one of the best scenes. It was like, what is the Council of Elrond? And then Sean Bean explains it because it's a secret meeting.
Yes. Yeah. Having
and
him...
like all of the nerds, every single one of them that wasn't the woman, is just like, because Lord of the Rings, remember? It was a secret meeting. They have to destroy the ring. I hate all of you.
All of you, yeah. She's so great.
Yeah.
So, and then just the sheer being an ass of like popping the pen on her head.
Yes.
Like it's just such a quick, subtle thing. And she's like, I'm gonna kick your ass later, but
yeah. And then when Donald Glover has the stapler thing and it's like, what was your name? Teddy. I'm the director of NASA.
I'm the director of NASA. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm your boss's boss.
It's so great because he's like, yeah. Yeah, well, and just kind of how they tie up some of the other story elements, right? Like Teddy arguing with Sean Bean's character that I can't remember the character's name, and just being like, "I'm going to expect your resignation afterwards," and like the fucking gall of that guy to like have a one-on-one meeting and be like, "Oh, it's a mystery. Who would have told them the thing?" Right? That's so weird. I was the only dissenting opinion. How could that have happened? And like. We're engineers at NASA, my dude. We can figure that much out. Like Jesus.
I mean, I still love how I think it really showcases, I would say the passion that these people in real life actually have for the work that they do. I think it's probably pretty accurate. I think they might feel like maybe there's a little bit too much demand on their time, because I think it is actually probably pretty true to life that they probably work too much, but
Oh yeah.
And how is like
Benedict Wong's character, like, we have to build this thing in 3 months. I need a change of clothes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then not to mention that they blew it up the first time, so then they had to do it again in like 20 days, and it's like, could you just even imagine burning, the midnight oil 6 months straight, and because you fucked it up for 10 days worth of time, now you have to do it again. Like, it's such a bad call, and it's like, I get it in the moment. And one of the like pieces of trivia that I thought was super interesting from IMDb was like, so they were using an Atlas V rocket, which is somewhat important to know because to date that has never happened with an Atlas V rocket, right? So knowing that, you can kind of understand the risk reward there, being like, okay, we've got one of the most stable launch systems of all time. Let's roll the dice, right?
Yeah.
But
how often does it reveal a problem?
I mean, 1 in 5 is a big deal, though, right? Because
1 in 20.
1 in 20, so 5%. Not okay, but yeah, like holy shit, man.
I mean, even like the director's
1 in 20. I'm a D&D player, man. I'm very familiar with 1 in 20. I would not have rolled that die, Like, no thanks.
But like the director brings up very succinctly, where he's just like, I'm just asking, can anyone find like some more time less risky? And nobody can. Like 5% is the best they got.
Yeah. Okay, Ben. All right, we've nerded. What didn't you like?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the movie is very, very tidy. I would suggest that it's actually a bit distractingly tidy, and that's not just a quibble. I think that the movie could have done with a bit more. I think it was a bit too quick. I think once a problem arises, when you tell a story where there's problem solution, that kind of works when it's basically audio logs that you're reading in a book, and the guy's okay, so I had all this. Day 2, oh wow, I figured it out, right? But in the movie, it's just problem. It's like, oh no, there's a problem, and you can't rest. You can't just say, oh, there's a problem, because immediately, if you blink, he'll find a solution in the next minute of the movie, right?
I think you're downplaying the clear timeline involved, right? Because in some of that stuff, it took him like 2 weeks to figure out that problem, and you've got a few minutes where you see him just staring out the window thinking, but that's not very exciting to watch, right? So,
yeah. I mean, I get what you're saying there, but to counterpoint that, it is a 2-hour, 20-ish minute movie that takes place over what, 2.5 years?
Yeah, I think the thing is, this is the way XKCD, that webcomic, sold it. That scene from Apollo 13 where the guys drop a box upside down and a bunch of tubes fall out, and they have to figure out a problem how to save these guys? It's like, yeah, that's the entire movie. It's like, whoa, right? So that really is the entire movie. Is problems and solutions. It's not aiming for anything deeper. It's not trying to say anything particularly interesting. It's just tech problem, tech solution, tech problem, tech solution. And so far as that goes, it's fine. But it's ultimately a bit flat. It's just kind of the same thing over and over. It could have really leaned into it.
Like,
I think. Okay. Okay.
I mean, so there's tons of problems because he's stranded on a planet 4 years away from anyone being able to help, and he's got 60 days worth of food. I mean, those are immense problems to be able to figure out anything. And so all of those need to, like, those aren't 2-week fixes. Those are like, okay, I've extended my food by like 4 months, and then he still needs more. He still needs to get in contact with it. These aren't really big things. And like, even just the communication with the hexadecimal thing, that still took hours for them to tell him the code to be able to plug into the map, to still have a 32-minute round trip time. And they established all of this, because I don't know anything about how to get to Mars, but I remember all of these numbers and details and the distances and everything it took. And they constantly kept saying of like, okay, so we're at Sol 600 something, and we've got until at like 9:16 to be able to hit as enough food. Find 4 more days in the calories. And then he's like, you fucking want 4 more days out of the a meal per day I've been already having. That's not possible.
It's a real punch in the dick.
Yeah. It has been 7 days since I ran out of ketchup. That was the best line of the whole movie.
To be fair, I actually thought, because I've seen this movie so many times, I saw like earlier in the movie where he's just like squirting a lot of ketchup into the cup. I'm just sitting there thinking, my dude, you should be more careful with that amount of ketchup.
Yeah.
Right. He probably, like in that scene, he's thinking back to the like half cups wasted of ketchup that he could have like doubled his ration if he had thought of that too. But I mean, I think the part that helps keep moving it along is like you get a little bit of, I don't know a better word than the word that comes to mind is like fan service, in the sense that like he goes and digs up old rovers and shit to be able to like, you know, make this communication device. If you've paid attention to like NASA before, it wasn't a surprise, but it still would have been like, I don't know, like a shock, or like, you know, just like a pleasant happenstance to be like, you already know they do duplicate the rovers so that when they break in space on a planet 14 billion light years away, that they can repair and work on it at home. So like all of those scenes are kind of rewarding, being a NASA nerd. And then, you know, on top of that, you've got his completely antithetical sense of humor, right? Like everybody else is professional. They're all wearing suits. Even like, you know, Wong's character is like very buttoned up compared to everything else. And he's one of the most like hair let down guys. And then you've got like, you know, Watney basically just being crass as shit. The whole pirate conversation, like it just helps carry the pacing of the movie, in my opinion. It turns out, so like I looked it up for IMDb again, but you know, like the whole comment that he makes that they don't show because it was too crass for the president or whatever is like, hey, look, boobs, and then he sends them ASCII boobs, and it's such a juvenile thing, but that was
the thing that he did.
I know. I was like, no, I'm sure he didn't.
I thought he was telling them to go fuck themselves.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Well, because he does that in every other scene, right? Like every time the botanist, you know,
that scene where Winston, where he's saying like, do you think he's like, are you fucking kidding me? Or is he like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Well, and some of his one-liners, though, I mean, I'm going to science the shit out of this, fuck you, Mars, and I am the greatest botanist on this planet, you know, or like, those are my favorite lines, you know, just those.
Thankfully, nothing in the history of humanity has gone wrong when you light hydrogen on fire.
Right. and then like talking about science detail, so here's one that goes towards he didn't magically just solve it the first time, right? Apparently I forgot to calculate in the oxygen that I'm exhaling because I'm an idiot, and I'm like, dude, there's a room full of engineers over here that forgot that, right? That doesn't make you an idiot, but that is a big oversight, obviously, because you exploded. So
yeah, but like, I'm doing really complex, life-saving math and experiments, and I forgot this tiny thing. And because the bar is so high for how much he can understand, I'm an idiot. And like, yes, that's something I guess you should have thought about, but it's not the same thing as like you forgot to carry the decimal and now everything is wrong and the whole space shuttle blows up.
I mean, ish, but no.
I mean, it's I don't know. But that was another moment of like, the fire is lit and he's like, woohoo! And then he explodes. And it's like, yeah, I blew myself up. And I'm going to get back to work as soon as my ears start raining. It's just the pacing of everything that he's fixing and doing. And like, this is really tense because it can blow up, and that he did.
It's just, you know, the delivery on that specific scene is also just so, like how, you know, also visually, he sits down, he's still smoking a little bit. It's just, it's so good.
Yeah. Matt Damon's delivery in the whole movie is really something because he has to show what this character is going through, both like all the times that he's determined to actually survive and not give up, and all of the isolation and the worry and the stress. Like when the hab does blow up and he goes into the rover to be safe, and like that was perfect. But then just the isolation as he's traveling away from the hab to get to the Mav, to get off the planet, and he's just like drained. But that, and being able to carry his side of the movie almost entirely through voiceover or talking to a camera, being alone, like he's not getting that chemistry from another actor in any way. He's entirely from himself. It's really something to see.
Yeah, I was actually also going to bring it. I like how they made this adaptation from text logs from the book into him basically vlogging on Mars. I actually thought it would have been really funny if they kind of made a joke out of this, that he's like the first vlogger on Mars. Like have some jokes with that too. That would have been pretty good. I also think to circle back to where we started with Ben's stupid dissenting opinion.
Oh my goodness!
Come on.
He gets to have his own opinions, man.
I get why this movie is popular. It is a feel-good triumph of ingenuity, but it's ingenuity in this kind of crazy hypothetical circumstance. There's just not much more than that, and there's even a bit too much of that. They could have had a lot more times where he's really grappling with a story like this, a premise like this. You're trapped on a desert planet, true Robinson Crusoe, but you're not just Robinson Crusoe. You're not just trying to figure out how to survive. What if, you could almost go existential, really. It could go in a lot of deeper themes about isolation and the individual psychology of the guy trapped. I don't think it went that deep. Not very much. It was kind of just.
He was alone up there for like 3 months, not having any communication. They figured out he was alive, but they couldn't communicate yet. But he was basically alone, recording his attempts to survive in case he doesn't make it. That's the first thing he said.
Right.
I think kind of how he deals with this awful situation he's in is his brevity and his humor, and it doesn't just because he doesn't get depressed or show it in the same way that you would normally expect. I mean, you can see. I feel like you see the struggle. I think.
Yeah. I think part of the problem is at the end of the day, you're right, but this wasn't that movie. And so you're going to have to go find a different movie where that happens, in the same sense that this movie wasn't any kind of grimdark, right? Because there are setbacks, right? We could talk about the probe crashing. We could talk about having to reach out across China was literally the only way that they could get him safe in home. We could talk about him blowing himself up and a dozen other things. But even still, there were 3 main components from the story that even Andy Weir was like, if any of these had failed, I couldn't figure out a way around. So he wanted to do drama, but at the end of the day, the story was always going to be about the guy coming home. So in a way, it was Brightest timeline, right? You can have every setback in the book, except for one of these 3 things, or the Hermes blowing up or something, right? Because he was coming home. That's the story. That's the end all of it and everything like that. So there are stories where he dies. There are 1,000 universes where he died. There are hundreds of universes where the crew morale suffered for the 4 months that they were radio silenced without realizing he was alive. There's a whole lot more depressive episodes and that sort of thing. But that, I don't see how that makes the story better, right? That's just a different story with a lot of the same components. So,
yeah. It sounds like Ben is looking for No Country for Old Men in space.
Woo. Now, I think that's too far, but, why he runs around just murdering Martians with a cattle prod,
But then, that in particular, the person that you're rooting for doesn't make it out. It's that's, if you're wanting something that's as desolate as that isn't this story, because this is someone who is I will say, like, inhumanly inspirational of, like, I'm not going to die here. I wake up and stub my toe and I want to end the day. And he's like, no, I have to keep going. I have to go back to work as soon as my ears stop ringing. And yes, there is that inspirational, addictive aspect to that. But that is what this story is, like you said. And it's not the depressive side. It's not the, like, even they are going into the isolation. He is going into, like, the letter he sends to Commander Lewis of, please tell my parents I'm glad that they were my parents when I'm dead.
Right.
And he's really facing the existential thing. And he started it out like with, if the oxygenator dies or fails, he's dead. If the water reclaimer fails, he's dead. If the hab explodes, he's going to implode. And all of those other things, he is very, very aware of his mortality. And so they are dealing with it with the promise of a happy ending.
Right.
And that's what the story is.
Yeah, because that's where you could argue some of the unrealistic in the sense that he got incredibly lucky, right? Like the hab is rated for like 60 days, and he spends years in it. You know, the rover is only rated for like 50 kilometers a day, and he makes a 3,200 kilometer journey, and that's just that one journey. He still has several other multi-week, you know, like a week out to get the rover and then back again, you know, types of things that are more or less like, you know, dry runs for his final exodus. But at the same time, like, there's no way that the rover was rated for that. The fact that he doesn't like breach a tire or you know, get his axle stuck or something like that. The fact that they've got the Ares 4 rocket on Mars years in advance when they're worried about what if the wind tips it over. Like, so yeah, you could dig into some of these things, but at the same time, like, you know, part of it is the storytelling, but it just would have been a whole lot shorter and possibly less interesting if some of those other things that were every bit as likely to fail did fail, right? Because the end of the day is like showing his perseverance and coming home. Absolutely, like, you know, probably 9 out of 10 times in real life, somebody would have died. And the director probably would even enjoy that movie because she likes dark and grim things. But in this case, like, I don't think it detracts from the movie knowing that like every bit as much as his hard work and ingenuity, it was also fucking luck. Because, you know, like, think about even just him blowing up the hab. Like, if that had been a slightly larger explosion, that would have breached the hab and that would have been the end of it, you know, like, so it just, yeah, there's a lot of that sort of thing. But, you know, I like enjoying seeing the science. I like enjoying seeing even some of the politics, like the scene where they finally realize that he's moved the rover, but then also that he's like driving off to the middle of fucking nowhere. Mm-hmm. And Chiwetel is losing his mind trying to figure it out. Vincent is the character name, right? So Vincent's losing his mind trying to figure it out, and they go into the fucking you know, the mess hall, and the people in the background are like, you can't do that. It's like, dude, he's like the deputy director of NASA. Chill the fuck out. And he just draws like 2 dots in a line. He's like, oh, okay. Everyone's like, 2 minutes ago you were crazy and now it's okay. Well, yeah, I know where he's going now. You know, so. And
then immediately says, I need to get on a plane.
Right.
Like, as soon as he got it, it's like, okay, we have work to do. Back to JPL, back to Pathfinder and everything. But yeah.
Yeah,
it's just, I just think showcases again that these in real life, I think that's it's very true to how most of these people work. They are so passionate about what they do. I also think there's very like it is an uplifting story, and to Ben's point about the depth, I feel like there is quite a bit of depth into this story about how humanity comes together to save this one guy on Mars. Like, think of the expense of going back for one guy like that, all the things they do.
Right.
I'm not sure we would do that in real life if it happened. The international cooperation, I'm not sure that would happen. I think that's like, it's a very positive message.
I'm going to be a cynic for a minute though, because at the end of the day, the result was they spent all these billions of dollars to save one dude. Once again, Matt Damon is stranded somewhere, and we've got to save him, right? However, in reality, especially Teddy's perspective, you know, director of NASA, he spent billions of dollars to fucking save NASA. Like, let's be cynical for just a second. Like, if they left him behind, and if they said, what you gonna do? He's gonna be dead before the time they get back, and then he very painfully dies in the public eye. That's the end of NASA, right? That's going to set back the space race for decades.
When Vincent Kapoor was being introduced, like Ares 4 is still upcoming. We have work to do. He's not going to decompose. We have to figure this out. And it's like, how do you spin it that they can continue functioning when Teddy wants to stay out of the public eye and like let all the tempers cool? It's like, okay, so we're going to bring his body back, and then they realize that he's not dead. But yes, if they just let him starve to death because it would be too costly to get him back, they'll never have public support again.
Yeah, but I would almost prefer not so much that they would actually do it. I would be afraid that they would get blocked by politicians. No, this is too expensive. This is not worth one man's life.
Yeah, and then that politician can say, you're not willing to save the American that's stranded on Mars because of money, and then they lose their elections and blah, blah, blah. Right. This is something that everyone has interest in making sure it happens for the publicity.
And you may be right, Andreas. Like, that's not something they focused on. You get Congress in the abstract, right? Where, like, either Vincent or Teddy talk about having to go to, Congress members to get the support that they need and that sort of thing. So almost certainly somebody was daft enough to make that argument over the course of the thing. Once again, that wasn't the story we were telling, right? So they got overruled even if it was there, right? Ultimately it did get greenlit and that sort of thing. The Marjorie Taylor Greens didn't win, and talk about like, well, we got to spend those $2 billion on AR-15s at home. So,
Wasn't the reason that the Challenger exploded was because the O-rings were too cheaply made? Wasn't that it?
I don't know about that, but I mean, certainly like it was the foam insulation. Oh, Challenger, right? So I'm thinking Columbia. So it popped a seal or something like that. But
but I thought that maybe it was Feynman or Sagan or one of those really big names of physicists looking into things. It's like because the rubber or whatever that was made out of it, like it expanded or did not happen correctly or do that sealing job because it was too cheaply made, and no one was criticizing it at a high enough level to be able to get it to stop. They needed to spend the extra money to keep 5 people alive.
Right. It's going to take a while to read through this, but yeah, like I think so. What it ultimately was, I mean, so they decided to launch even though the temperatures were lower than normal. So that was part of it, but I don't know if there was something that they should have been doing mechanically. But I think part of it was like there was an objection. Again, I'm speed reading this. I'm not trying to slow it down or anything, so take it with a grain of salt. But certainly part of it was too cold that day to go ahead with the launch, and they decided not to scrub it. So, but
there's so many factors to a space launch. It's insane. If anyone's ever tried to catch some of the SpaceX launches live, like it's so often where it's just like, oh, launch canceled.
Right. Well, I mean, part of that these days, especially, is because of all these other incidences where they were like, "Oh, it's a 1 in 20 chance, right? What's the problem?" But it's even SpaceX with their unmanned stuff, scrubs plenty of missions because weather's fine here, but 20,000 feet up, you've got gusts that we didn't expect and that sort of thing. And that was another thing that I kind of liked the detail in The Martian was, Iris-1, if I remember the probe's name right, it eventually goes because some of the food supplements liquefied in flight. And I was like, man, like when you first hear that, it just sounds like bullshit, but like that's what happened in the story. And like, they even explore some of it again in the trivia where, they talk about like, it's not just the fact that it like liquefied and shifted the balance, but the reverberations of the liquid sloshing around because they weren't properly stored because they didn't expect it to liquefy because, like it becomes this compounding thing. And like, that sloshing mechanism is something you have to even deal with on terrestrial Earth, right? Like, tanker trucks have to deal with it. Even Navy ships was the example that they used in the trivia. Like when a ship is sinking, they may deliberately flood the compartment to keep the reverberations from pulling the ship under, because the force of that impact on both sides is even more. Like it just
I didn't know that.
Crazy. Nerd. Sorry. So, but anyway, Ben, so Was that the crux of your thing, or was there more? Like,
no, I think the biggest problem with the movie was it's not much more than what it tries to be, and I say if it's this perfection, it's a very small perfection. I don't think that it has particularly deep insight into how people act or who people are.
okay,
I think it's carried by performances, and it's a clever adaptation, and it's beautifully shot. I think Ridley Scott does a wonderful time. There's wonderful stuff with the effects, especially the. Well, there's one shot in particular where it goes straight from like boring press conference kind of shot, then to divvy it up, it goes straight to the overhead shot in the Hermes. So that was just that sort of visual flair is what I think the movie does well. I just think it's kind of in service to a very trivial kind of story. But I know
you wanted it to talk about the human condition rather than.
I think movies should have some kind of. I think movies in general should have some kind of insight into how people act and who people are. Doesn't have to.
I don't necessarily. I mean, I get, that's also why I think like this whole with our perfect movie segment here is that I say that we bring our perfect movie, right? Because you put weight on different things than what I put weight on, and Justin put weight on different things than I put weight on. Like, if there's not good pop culture references in this movie that he can use later, it's not a perfect movie.
Well, and I definitely. I appreciate that. No, so that's what makes this a discussion and not a decision. I don't think
the thing that makes me confused. Like, he has the story about an inspiration and blah blah we talked about, but like there is insights to the human condition of all of the humans that have acted on this and all of the forces that are working on it. Like Martinez is a good example of like he has a kid that he loves and he's really happy to being a dad, but like as his wife was pissed at him for agreeing to add another 500 days. It's like, why did you do that? You should have done it. Yeah. But also, he is that adrenaline junkie nerd. He loves being in space more than he loves being on Earth, and that is a real thing that people do experience, and maybe not in the same space medium. But I think they did have those little bits of insights of the human condition. It just wasn't a whole philosophical movie. And it's like, that's why I'm confused with Ben's criticism more than.
Oh yeah, well, and so what you do is you have a pot boiler with tension, and there's no tension in this movie because it's problem solution. You're dizzy.
Yeah, it's tension. I feel like you want
tension at all. There's no tension at all in this movie. Well, they establish a pattern of problem solution. In the very next minute, there's no breathing room for the audience to feel tense.
But the whole movie's tension.
That's so you're telling me we can't have a tense movie because at the end of the day we know, for example, like Captain Kirk's name is on the marquee, so we know he's never in any danger, so there's never any tension. I got to tell you, I've seen the movie half a dozen times, and the scene where he gets in the MAV and the capsule is tumbling through space and they're not sure that they can make it and they're going too fast and all of that shit, I know how it's going to end, and I still got tense. So you're telling me even then you didn't feel any tension?
No, not then. But there were times in the movie where I did feel tense. But it shocked me because I was so used to the movie making me feel kind of numb from the fact that the guy was so clever. He always found a solution.
Are you trying to
it's not that he found a solution
with too many words that you found parts of the movie boring?
Well, I mean, that's the
no, not with too many words. Yeah,
was like you're saying that you didn't have enough of a commentary on the human condition or something. But is that your way of trying to say that you were just bored with the middle because you felt that the ending was guaranteed?
No, I think what I said was there are two separate critiques. One is it doesn't have any kind of depth of insight, which would be fine if it at least were tense, and it's not. Because of how quickly it moves through problems. And what you could do, you could have the same number of problems, the same number of solutions. You just vary when the solution comes up. So maybe he has this lingering problem over here, and a couple more problems stack up, and then he solves number 1, 5, 7, 2, 3 in that order, or something like that, where it's not just exactly paired. But it's like that if you look at the movie, if you watch the movie and you pay attention to that, that's what you'll find, I think. So yes, the movie was boring in a lot of places.
Disagree, but because for example, the overarching problem is, the whole getting home and starving to death thing, which pretty much doesn't get resolved until he gets picked up in the capsule. They still have to solve the weight problem, like that entire montage. Like, even if you're just taking like the final act of the movie, right? Like he hasn't even gotten to the bad parts yet, right? It was like, well, shit, let's get to the bad parts then. Like it just, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like it wasn't hitting you or you weren't paying attention. I'm not trying to take a jab. I'm just like, I feel like it was there. It just didn't resonate with you, so.
I also kind of object to the idea that, or at least it seems like you're kind of presenting that idea that no tension equals boring movie. Not that I think that this was a boring movie, even if there was, like, there are movies I can watch with no tension. There's no real tension in the movie, and I can still be entertained. And like, if you're bored, presumably you're not entertained. You don't need tension in a movie to be entertained.
He watches black and white movies. He knows that.
Well, okay.
So the other thing I was going to bring up about the human element, and like, not again because it wasn't front and center because this wasn't the story we were focusing on, but like, if you want the human element and the tension, you get a little bit from the PR director, right? Because she's just like at a loss of what to say at times, but you really, really get it between Sean Bean and Teddy's character, the director thing. When he storms out of the meeting at the end to be like, you're a fucking coward, like, to me, that's the human tension. The problem is, it's 3 seconds of it before he storms off and then subverts the whole thing, right?
Right.
So
exactly.
a lot of that stuff happens off screen.
That's exactly what I'm saying. There's exactly 3 seconds.
They had talked about that multiple times before he went off and sent the thing to them on the telemetry plans. It's like he said, like, they should know that he is alive. Okay, not until they have a plan. Finally, they were able to tell him, like, because we have communication and we're working on a plan. But he was always saying repeatedly that it is their decision. It is their lives and their crewmate. They get to make that decision. And that is something that was, I thought they brought about on kind of an oblique angle, because Teddy thinks that we shouldn't be risking 5 other people's lives to save 1 person. And that is a valid position to have. Also, those 5 people get to make their own decisions of their own lives. And that's also valid. And so when they're butting heads, I thought that is a philosophical human condition look of what do you do in that situation. And that's what Sean Bean's like, whoever gave them the information, they made their own decision because they couldn't have like over-engineered anything of that. It's like, those are all good points. And I feel like it's like you're missing all of those points where they did go into human psychology.
It's the trolley problem in space.
Yeah.
Do we leave the one guy to die, or do we send the 5 people to go save him? It's like a reverse trolley problem in a way, but...
Yeah, but it's yes, the framing is basically the same.
I'm reaching now, but if you dig for it, I think it's there though. That's part of the point. Like in that same argument, or in one of the many heads of NASA meetings and whatever, with the whole Teddy again arguing with Sean Bean's character with the whole you're only saying that because you can get away with that because Vincent isn't here to argue the other side, and so I honestly think that Teddy's being a shitbag throughout most of the movie because he takes these political stances instead of, really looking at the humanity of it and that sort of thing, right? But, in that moment, he's being a good leader because he's like, look, obviously there's a dissent and he should be able to, argue his side of it too. We can't just decide and cut him out of it more or less. But, again, I feel like some of that's there. It's just not, obviously Watney is stranded on Mars. Who's he going to argue with? Well, the botanists. Maybe that's what we needed. We needed more arguments with the Earth botanists. Would that have been more entertaining?
I don't feel like he's being he's not a douchebag or per se, but he's a pragmatist, I would say. But where he's like he just goes for the least risky option, which a guy who ends up being director of NASA, it's likely that's the kind of person he is.
And the math does work if you choose 1 person in high risk situation more than 5 in a medium risk situation.
Right.
I mean, it's valid on both sides. I mean, I agree with Sean Bean's character. It is ultimately their decision to risk their lives. But I understand. Like, you can also, as director of NASA, feel like they're going to make the wrong decision and we should take that away from them so that they don't do the wrong thing and kill themselves and make it even worse for everyone who's been working on this, all of NASA, them and their families, that calculus still needs to be discussed. And I just feel like they were kind of doing it.
The commander brings that up too, with like the other part of it is you're about to have 200 days of unplanned space travel, risking 5 additional people, right? So is the one bird in the bush more important than the 5 in your hand? Is kind of what Teddy's math comes down to, right? We got a really shitty situation that we left a guy there and he's like 99% chance he's going to die, or we got like a 30% chance of sending these 5 back and then we lose them all. Like if you thought the press was bad for the one guy, like just imagine, the questions that he gets when, they were all but landed. They were almost safe. How do you fucking justify sending them back, And he's just supposed to be like, they made their own decision, like, because again, like in take the multiverse, approach. Like how many of those universes did he make it all the way to there, and then something bad happens to the Hermes, right? They fly through a dust storm.
They could have like gotten all the way back to Mars, failed to get Watney off the planet, and so he dies off in space or on the planet or whatever, and then had 200 extra days of unplanned space travel, and then died on the way.
Right. Or died on the way back, or died. Yeah. I mean, especially there at the end, again, to highlight the drama, because I felt it, they're literally 200 meters apart and they're going 40 meters per second too fast. Like, it's like, could you imagine? We just fucking spent 100 something days getting back here and we're this fucking close. And then at the end of the day, then he does something stupid in the movie anyways, and he does the Iron Man thing. Or Sebastian Stan fucking jumping around like goddamn Spiderman on the exterior of the spaceship and be like,
while the bomb is going off, so that it's going to do a really fast deceleration, hang on the outside.
Right. Like, yeah, all of that shit where it's just like, this guy's about to be spaced and he wasn't even on the menu today, right? Like, so yeah.
Can you come inside and make a bomb?
I know, right? You excuse me? So yeah.
Can I just point out setting off an explosive device on the space is an extremely bad idea?
Yeah, that's usually the opposite thing of what we're supposed to do. I mean, it's like when Watney is like, I mean, he literally addresses it, right? Luckily, in the history of space travel, nothing ever bad has happened by trying to start a fire, or whatever. So.
Fire in space is bad on account of like everyone dying and everything, except for the personal cross. Sorry about that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I respect Ben has a different opinion, but I have a really hard time. Usually, I can like see a lot of like Ben's point, even if we make jokes when we don't agree and and black and white movies. I got a really hard time seeing this point, but it's my perfect movie. I really love this movie,
and I'm glad you love this movie. I don't want to take that away. I don't want.
No, you can't take it.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I don't even look like I'm trying. I don't even look like I'm trying to take it away. I just.
You needed more. Do you have an example scene or anything in mind where you were like, man, this could have been better, or you just didn't every 5 minutes?
I think largely, honestly, the overhead shots of him just traveling and trying to figure it out were great. The moments when the score cut out and there wasn't disco playing. I get the disco joke. I get the joke, right? But having that kind of pop music playing
too recent really for you.
Well, no, it undercuts. It undercuts.
Some 20s
when you feel a movie music, it makes you want to dance. What does it make you want to do? It makes you want to dance. So you start, you feel like you're involved in this really driving, moving, progressing kind of movement, this kind of motion. But that's not what those moments need. What you need is to kind of really lean hard on the tragedy or what could go wrong even harder. Not just what people are talking about, but make the whole movie, make that whole movie an experience of that, rather than just one thing falling after another, and you're just constantly catching all these things that fall down. I don't.
The thought that occurs to me here is that to flip the example, so taking the hot stuff scene, y'all know which one I'm talking about.
Yes.
So taking the hot stuff scene, you could even make the argument though that he's throwing himself into the humor and the lack of seriousness, because the opposite is literally melting himself from the inside out and dying, right? Is that he's got literally a nuclear battery in the back seat being held down by a fucking seatbelt and wrapped around with, NASA grade Mylar.
Yeah,
and
that
he's
thing
just got
that
to
they
pretend
deliberately
that's not
buried
happening.
with the flag to like, don't accidentally unbury it, Mark, you moron.
Don't
That
dig
thing?
up the decaying plutonium, Mark.
Yeah,
Right. I'm pretty sure that was the name of that lecture. So, but like that sort of thing, right? Because again, like the survival is got to be like 90% mental, for that sort of thing. Like he's an engineer. He's a botanist in the movie. In the book, he is also a mechanical engineer, which is why he's as handy with tools and some of the other offshoot science that we see, right? But like at the end of the day, if he spends the entire 3,200 kilometer journey thinking about that battery could go critical at any moment, is not going to help his mental state compared to the fact that he's already like eating a third of a piece of meat, that he's supposed to have 3 times a day, or
at some
like
point your brain takes shortcuts. You no longer think of all of the different steps that you have to do. You like they're shortened and you just do them, and you're not taking up his mental space. He is no longer thinking or worrying about the fact that the nuclear reactor could melt him from the inside out, because he has to make 3,200 kilometer mile thing, and he has to set up the solar panels, and all those things are taking up too much of his mental space. Or even if he's not, because he has like 13 hours worth of downtime every day to be able to get the thing to charge, if he thinks about it, he'll just fall over.
Yeah. And just to clarify, I used the radiation thing as shorthand. It's not that kind of radiation, but just for the scientific accuracy.
Yes,
but
it's not the kind that will melt him, but it possibly does have effects on him that he find later, but they don't know what those are. But he's just not going to die of radiation sickness within a few hours.
Right. It is also hard, right? Because I get Ben's point of view in the, I think that could be an interesting story, but like Justin said, that's not the story it's supposed to be. In terms of like what this, like the book this is based on, this is a book about solving problems and stuff that happens.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I've definitely read the book, and the thing is that was a problem in the book too. It didn't have much more than its big idea and its execution, rather than I keep beating the same drum. I'm not saying it's not well made. It's definitely well made. It's definitely well cast. I have a lot of praise for the movie. I just don't. I think there's some serious problems with it too. So I
just to
I
end
know,
like on the positivity from you, Ben. I would love. I mean, finish your sentence, but I would like to ask you, like, because I don't think we'd ask you that much about that. We talk about what we like, and then Ben gets to be the negative guy because he said it wasn't a perfect movie for him. What did you like about them? What you said, like the casting, but what were the positives for you? Like the standouts.
Sure. I think the biggest standout for me would have been the biggest standout for me.
I think the biggest standout.
Well, I think the biggest standout for me would have been the way it was shot. I think it was a great movie to look at. And I think another thing I really appreciate, having read the book, as I think, considering this adaptation of the book, I think they did a bang-up job with it. I think the kind of book it is does not really lend itself easily to an adaptation. It's a lot of this audio logs sort of stuff, and I think it manages to pull that off. So I think those are things I really appreciate about the movie, and I don't want to seem like I'm just a contrarian. I think there's a lot of worthwhile stuff going on here, but I just not my cup of tea. So
yeah, towards your point about it presenting problem and solution so rapid fire, I think the ultimate flaw in that is the point that it started out as a blog post serial, that he was basically literally just writing individual chapters. So This is a little bit of speculation on my part, but because of its serialized nature, my guess is he was literally presenting a problem and a solution in a single post, stitch those together largely into a book that got carried over. So if you weren't aware of the history there, that might help explain what some of the
I've read many a web serial, and I am now. That's exactly where the seams are. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't change ultimately the end result, right? But it does help to understand, where things came from. Yeah. So,
have you actually read anything else by Andy? Anyone else other than me have read? You've read the book. Have you read anything else, Ben?
No, I've just read The Martian.
Okay, I mean, I read. He has 3 books out. A new one just came out. I haven't read yet, but the other one he wrote, which didn't get received as well, I still thought was very good, and it's still very much in that. It's a more cohesive story, I would say, in many ways, but it still very much has there is this science and this problem-solving thing. That's definitely, the Andy Weir books.
Sure.
But I would recommend them.
Artemis, right? Yeah. That was his
What's the premise of that one? What's the premise of that
one? A smuggler thief on a colonized moon. And like things go awry, and she has to do things and solve things, and there's like a criminal on and all these things.
That's exactly what The Martian is with a different character.
Oh, whatever.
It's fine. If you like it,
it sounds more expanse. Where they're basically on a colony, and she's part of the seedy underbelly a little bit. But
it kind of seemed like crime thug mafia noir or something like, but in space.
But that
still
requires
a lot of science, a lot of solving and stuff. Yeah, but it is. I would say more expansy than Martian-y. But he definitely has a niche that he likes to write. I will give you that, Ben. But I don't think it's fair to say, it sounds like The Martian, because I don't think that's correct. But I've read the book.
The framework's the same, right? It's a problem solution type of story, right? So it's like James Bond is a spy in this book, and he's a spy in that book, and like the story is fundamentally different, but if the framework's the same, like authors got some formula somewhere, right? So, but do we have an idea of what we want to talk about next time? Should we make Ben pick again?
I don't.
Maybe.
Oh no!
It's about that time. I think we have gone around the table, so to speak. So
I would. If Ben picks, I would like to challenge him again.
I mean, you don't have to be put on the spot. You get time to research.
I'll take the challenge. I'll take the if you give me time to research, I'll take the challenge. What's the challenge?
Okay, sure.
Your perfect movie. No other.
What a challenge, movie. Guys! You guys are really breaching the contract here. So.
My challenge would have been, let's just go with Alex's, which is like your perfect movie that's like new, like post 2010.
Post 2010.
I don't even want to put like boundaries on it or anything. It's just because it's like I feel like you have
nobody else has
not watched this movie correctly. So I want to see what you find the perfectest movie that cannot ever be made better, so I can understand more of what's going on in your brain.
Well, okay. I mean,
Shutter Island, huh? That's
weird. I wouldn't be able to do that, Ben. By the way, I can't pick. This is the most perfect movie for me. I can't do that. I can say this is a perfect movie.
Well, no, that's why I accomplished that because we did The Mummy first, and I can't think of the more perfectest movie ever. So it's just like that's it.
I can't do
Every time I come back to that thing, it's like that movie is wonderful and it's perfect and it's like I'm glad that we already discussed it because otherwise we'd be already discussing it again and again and again. But,
I mean, I don't know. What was Ben's opinion on that? Like, was there enough tension?
On which movie? Shutter Island?
The Mummy. I'm making a joke.
Oh, the Mummy. Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah. I'm more like Gurr or Commander Shepard when perfect movies start getting thrown around and be like, this is the perfect movie on the Citadel, or this is my favorite show. And I mean, it just kind of depends on which genre we're talking about, right? Like, so I've got my favorite Star Trek movie, my favorite Star Wars movie, my favorite none of those things,
Yeah.
So
and there can be many perfect movies for you, but like if you just had to, if you were like gun to your head, forced to choose one to be able to raise
man.
our opinions of you.
Yeah, Ben's like, I don't want to die. No,
Okay, that's quite the caveat you put on there, Alex. Not his actual perfect movie, but one that he thinks will raise our opinion about him.
No,
I just feel like that's
like the other flip should be like, what if you got stuck in a room and had to watch this movie 365 times in a row or something like
That's
that?
fair too.
Know, like, you know, which is even tougher in some ways, right? Because in some music you tire of, and you're like, shit, I've listened to this album for 3 months. It's time for something new, but. You know, something.
But I never
along
feel
those
that tired
lines
of The
and-
Mummy. I feel like it's one of the things about like I cannot count how many times I've watched that movie because I just had it on repeat when I was a kid, over and over and over again, and I just watch it several times a year now. As yeah, I can. If I had to watch that movie every single day for a solid year, I could do it.
Right.
Well, if I had to choose my one favorite movie, what would it be? The movie I've seen a lot.
Hamster's working hard.
Well, see, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
I would have,
mean-
I would have said something like The Princess Bride, but that's like everyone loves that movie. Right? We already did it.
True.
So okay. There's a couple movies I've seen recently that are just phenomenal. One is a heist. I'll give you the premise. One is a tense heist movie told like a documentary. It's not a documentary, but it's a tense heist movie told like a documentary. Another one is a movie that's kind of about movies in the background, but it's really strictly straightforward, kind of a thriller with a lot of sensuality and no small amount of humor and human tragedy and some evil and some nasty little thinking. Those are two movies I've seen recently that I would consider perfect. Now, which of those sounds more interesting?
I'm confused about both of them. A heist told as a documentary, and then the other one that's like it has a lot of words that I like in it, but a movie about movies are generally annoying.
Nobody is an actor
I can't
in this
think.
movie. I don't think. Nobody in this movie is playing the part of an actor character, but it's more about voyeurism.
I mean,
the first one to me, but
first one to me too.
I ain't
You
choosing.
want to say? You ain't choosing? Okay. Well,
So-
it is. I'm pretty sure it's on Amazon Prime. It's called The Killing. The Killing.
Okay.
It's now that you know it's told like a documentary.
a recent one,
No. It's not the recent one. It's from like the 50s,
1956.
1956.
God.
I think.
Yep. You said recently, so Stanley Kubrick movie, so that tells you what we're dealing with. So that's good.
Yeah, so there's a few little things that might seem a little bit corny at the very beginning, but there's a couple things that really, this is a really kind of a nice. This is a super tense movie.
This is the one Gangsters done as a documentary.
Sort of, yeah. It kind of has that kind of air to it. Kind
Sure.
of has that air to it, especially at the beginning. I say that so you have a kind of a route into appreciating it.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm
Well,
kind of
alright.
curious, Ben.
Yeah.
And people say that when you pick a movie you want to watch, do you like? It's one of your criteria. It's like
How old is it?
old.
Can it be
No,
for a parent?
I know this is actually one I grew up watching, right? So this is a bit of a nostalgia pick for me. My wife and I just watched it, and I will say I think it is a pretty good movie. A pretty
so
good
it's
movie.
the parents to blame, as usual.
Oh,
So-
yeah, right.
unless Ben's secretly a vampire and be like, well, I grew up watching this in the 50s. So
Blah.
right.
You remember and you forget that his dad had like a whole like black and white movie reel thing. That's why Ben is the way he is.
These ideas are not mutually exclusive.
I grew up on Turner Classic Movies, right? So that and Cartoon Network. That explains everything about my movie preferences. So yeah, it's hopefully I hope you like it. I don't know. It's really a masterclass. Well shot, well told.
You make it sound good, so
I know. I don't know.
I'll give
I'm
it a
really
go.
worried.
Yeah.
I see the
Well,
director's
I'll try it out.
looks of disdain.
And
Well, see, the problem is
we'll
the
see.
director has a tough time watching movies that are 3 times as old as she is. So that's really where you kind of lose her. So
Fair enough. Yeah.
I think
when I
the,
get
the other
before
movie that I
1980s.
can't remember the name of it. I think that was probably the oldest movie
Shadow
I've
of
ever
a Doubt?
seen. Yeah, that one.
you could at least remember the name of the movie. Come on,
I remember the pieces of the movie. I just forgot the name. It's like that probably the oldest movie I'd seen so far, because I can think of several movies made in the 70s that I had seen, and then it just like before 1970s, like I can't think of anything. So
1943,
Wizard of Oz
right? So
probably,
it's-
but I don't think I've actually seen that all the way through in one sitting. I've just seen pieces of it.
Sure.
the point is, Shadow of Doubt's not about to get unseated by this movie. So so this movie's actually more recent than Shadow of a Doubt.
Oh, fair enough. Oh well, I mean, if you're going for the oldest movie,
No, please.
I would say
Metropolis or bust.
The Kid.
Nosferatu.
The Kid is
Okay,
the
fine.
best old movie, and that's like I'd actually consider that an old movie.
This movie has an 8 out of 10 on IMDb. So I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, well, the trouble with I also just watched some like Shawshank Redemption, which is phenomenal. But that's everyone loves Shawshank Redemption. That's not really a weird pick. I don't know. I feel like it was a challenge.
That's a base take, but it's a good take.
we'd say that
Well,
about a lot of our movies that you didn't like.
IMDb ratings tend to be for like the super awesome broski kind of movies, like a 300 or Shawshank Redemption, or where
Depends
it's
on
like
who's doing the
Fret-
presenting.
fret-
They
Well,
boys
that's
and
self-select
why I'm
that
kind
way.
of surprised. Like 85,000 reviews, 8 out of 10. I mean, that's something. That's
It's a good
statistic.
average.
So
Yeah.
but-
Okay,
Yep.
we'll give it a shot.
Oh,
see.
sorry. Sorry, guys. I don't want to be. I'm not trying to be a negative Nancy. I'm just.
the good news is there's no disco in this movie because it's older than literally fucking disco.
Yes.
So,
Might be the one bad thing about this movie is the disco. But it's also kind of a plot point.
Yeah,
Right.
that was like you get to suffer along with him.
Yep.
I think, yeah.
Oh.
Ben likes disco.